Harvey. On behalf of Victorian Video Productions, I'd like to welcome you to this advanced spinning workshop with Mabel Ross. Mabel tells us that when we first begin to spin, we are pleased just to have a yarn. Then we have to decide how to use it. Now Mabel will help you progress from having to use what you spin to spinning yarn planned exactly for any desired project. Perhaps a commercial knitting pattern to be followed, or warp or weft for weaving. The yarn will still have hand-spun character, but will be planned, high-quality yarn. This sounds interesting and challenging. Let's get started.
Hello, I am Mabel Ross. I live in Scotland and I have been spinning since 1971. I will be your instructor on this course. Yarn is spun from fibres, and in this course I will be using principally wool fibres and most often the sheep's wool. There are many types to choose from, and I will show you here 5 different types. First of all, merino, which is the finest and is has crimp, which is helps to make the yarn bulky. The next one is the down, which also has some crimp and is short also. This is hill wool, in which there is long hairs and some kemp, but can be quite fine. This is long wool, which is lustrous and has curls like mohair, the Angora goat fibre. And finally, we have mountain wool, which has long, coarse hairs and short underwool. It has some kemp too. It is a carpet fleece. These fibres are the ones we have to choose from, and we make our selection of what we will use for a project by considering the fineness of the fleece, first of all. We want fine fibres for fine garments, for wearing apparel. For furnishing fabric, we want a coarser fleece, and so we choose a more coarse fibre, a more coarse fleece. And finally, the crimp in the fleece is also a determining factor because of the bulk which it provides for the yarn. The different fibre lengths require different techniques, and we can practice these on sheep's wool and then use them to spin any other type of fibre, from cotton and silk, Angora rabbit, camel down, cotton here, and rami, or any others. Some people like to dive into a fleece and spin from it and accept the yarn that they get. I like to plan a project and make precisely the yarn I want to have. And so I like to prepare my fibres myself, right from the fleece. In fact, preparation is the secret of success. Fleece has a coating of grease and one of suint, or sheep's sweat. These come from the sheep's skin glands. Some grease is helpful for spinning, but suint consists of proteins and other sticky substances such as potassium salts, which attract dirt. They all dissolve in cold water, except the grease, which remains. So I soak all my fleece in cold water overnight, rinse and spin dry it in the morning. It is clean and pleasant to work with, leaves tools and spinning wheel clean. In fact, some techniques will simply not work with dirty fleece. However, merino is exceptionally greasy, and that must be washed with detergent. Sometimes spinners are taught first to card fibres and make a rolag and spin from that. I believe we learn more by first spinning from a combed staple. I'm now going to comb a medium staple. I want to comb out the short fibres and keep the long, and so I hold the staple very tightly. One more. I just want to open the fibres and leave them free. I'm now going to comb a short staple. Same applies. And there I lay it down, and I'm now going to comb a long staple. But for that, the flicker is a more efficient tool. Here is a long, lustrous staple, and I'm going to use the flicker as a comb to open the fibres and take out any short ones. Now these staples are all open and ready to draft and spin. But before I continue with the spinning wheel, I would like to show you how I use the spindle with such fibres. I think my method of using the spindle may help some people. First of all, I take a medium staple and I draft the fibres a little way. Of course, it's very easy to draft fibres when they're not twisted. But once they're twisted, as you will see, it makes a very strong thread. When they're twisted and strong, I make them into a loop, and I put my fingers down through the loop and up together and put the loop on the end of the spindle and draw it tight. I then give the spindle some twist. Now I don't want to waste time with it undoing, so I put it between my knees, and now I can draft the fibres and use the stored twist to make the yarn. Draft the fibres, use the stored twist to make the yarn. Now I'll join on another staple this way. I will always use the fibres over my hand. And join on, let the fibres join with the stored twist. Joins are always dangerous, so let's give another twist. And we can put it down below us and draft and follow up and draft and follow up, quickly making thread, controlled thread, and learning right from the start of how to draft, how we can draft fibres and make an even yarn. We can draft slowly and learn because the spindle is not allowed to untwist, and so we can now push it down, wind up the thread, put a half hitch on the top and continue spinning. And again, it is useful, especially when one is starting to spin with a spindle, to stop any chance of the spindle undoing. And then we can leisurely draft well and learn that. And of course, this is exactly the position that our hands take up as we spin at the spindle. I never leave go of the thread so that there's never any slub. I always pick up my fibres with the other hand and draft straight away. And as I have said, this is exactly how you spin on the spinning wheel. Scales on wool surface sometimes concern spinners, but do remember that these scales are only 1/200th of a millimetre thick. When being drafted, dry fibres have so much air round them that the effect of scales is not significant. Now, would you prepare some staples, as I have done, ready for spinning? Comb staples of more than one staple length. Before we actually start spinning, it would be well that we just check that we know exactly how the spinning wheel works. The treadle activates the driving wheel through the crank and drives the spindle whorl. If the treadle has a toe and heel action, so that the treadle overhangs the front bar of the spinning wheel, this toe and heel action enables us to start and stop the wheel without touching it. We can go in any direction. The driving band, which drives the spindle whorl, has a tension control here, which allows us to ensure that the driving band does not slip on the whorl or the driving wheel. Now let us look at the flyer assembly. I will just dismount it. The flyer assembly, of course, is what twists the yarn. Here we have the spindle whorl, and the spindle whorl and the flyer and the spindle must be rigidly connected. The bobbin must be able to turn freely and independently on the spindle. The flyer will lay the yarn onto the bobbin, and the bobbin will be stored, the yarn will be stored evenly by means of these hooks. Now let me put it back. Here is the yarn, which I will pull off the bobbin. This hook enables me to pull the yarn through the orifice. When I treadle and hold the yarn, the flyer and bobbin go round together. They can do no other, since they are connected by the thread. But the moment that I go on treadling but do not hold the yarn, it is taken up by the bobbin, because the bobbin is stationary and the flyer lays the yarn onto the wool. What is actually happening? When I treadle, the bobbin goes round with the flyer, and when I continue to treadle and do not hold the yarn, it is taken up. While I am, the means by which the bobbin is made stationary is the brake band here, the tension of which, it is an adjustable brake band, and its tension is controlled by this knob. While I am twisting the yarn, the bobbin is slipping under its brake band. When I do not hold the yarn, the bobbin is controlled by the brake band. and therefore the tension adjustment which controls this brake band must be very sensitively adjusted. It should never be too high, otherwise the yarn is pulled on too strongly and is out of your control. There are 3 different types of spinning wheel. They differ in the way that they store the yarn. This one is called Scotch tension. We will now look at the other 2. For the last demonstration, I had this same wheel set up with Scotch tension, that is to say, with a single drive band and a bobbin brake. But, as is the case with several types of wheel, this wheel has 2 alternatives. And I have now set it up with the other alternative, which is the double band. In this, the band is twice the length, the driving band is made twice the length. Both links are put round the driving wheel, but then one link goes round the spindle whorl and the other link round the bobbin whorl. It twists yarn in exactly the same way as the other setup, the Scotch tension. As I twist the yarn and hold it, the flyer and bobbin go round together. They can do. I beg your pardon, thread is broken. This is due, may I say, to the fact that when the yarn is stored on a single band, the Scotch tension wheel, we are rotating the flyer in the clockwise direction. But when we the yarn is stored in the other direction when we're spinning on this kind of yarn, this kind of arrangement. Now, when I hold the yarn and twist it, note that the flyer and bobbin go round at the same rate. They go round together and they can't do anything else because they're connected by the thread. But when I release the thread, it disappears into the orifice. What is happening? It is gone. I shall pull it back again. It is rather similar to the case of the Scotch tension. The difference in this case, as I explained, that the method of storing the yarn depends on a difference of speed between the bobbin and the flyer. In this case, the difference in speed between the bobbin and the flyer is achieved by the fact that the bobbin is driven faster by its link of the driving band. It's driven faster than the spindle whorl because the diameter of the bobbin whorl is smaller than that of the spindle whorl. And so when its link takes over, it drives it faster and it pulls the yarn onto itself. Just let me show you that again. Here we are holding the thread and twisting it. And you see if I go slowly that the bobbin and flyer are going round together. When I leave go, they still seem to be going round together, but the yarn goes in when I'm not holding it. This means that as we are twisting the yarn, when we're spinning, the bobbin is slipping under its link of the driving band. And when we let the tension off the yarn, when we let the hold off the yarn, the bobbin is driven faster. So once again, the tension of the wheel, and in this case, there is only one tension control because the double band is one band and we have only this one control to control the tension of both the drive and the tension of the wheel, which controls the bobbin. And so we have this tension control to ensure that we have no slippage and that the bobbin is driven faster. when we offer it the yarn. But please note that again, the tension should not be too high, or else the yarn is pulled out of our hand and we lose control of our spinning yarn. This spinning wheel is a Louette, and like many others of its type, it is bobbin driven and has a flyer brake. In this case, the difference in speed between the flyer and the bobbin, which must be achieved in order to have yarn storage, is achieved by the flyer being braked instead of the bobbin, as in the case of the Scotch tension. Again, when I spin, the bobbin and flyer go round together. When I let go of the yarn, it is taken up and disappears. The flyer brake breaks the flyer and allows the bobbin to go continuous to rotate. The main point about this one is this, that as you store the yarn, the bobbin is moving and the flyer is stationary. And so as the yarn is taken up, there is no more twist put into the yarn. The flyer is stationary, and it is the flyer that twists the yarn. The other point about this is that because of the heavy weight of the bobbin and flyer and the friction due to this elastic band, very often you should actually operate it with an extremely light tension, because there is enough friction in the various bearings and with the weight of it that you don't require much tension at all. Correct tension is very important when you are spinning. If the tension is too loose, then the yarn will not take on and becomes over twisted. If the tension is too tight, I'm having to resist the strong pull of this yarn, and my hands feel the strain. Correct tension, in my view, should be such that you can pull the yarn off the bobbin with a little resistance, but not feeling that there's any risk of it breaking. If you have the tension too tight for any length of time, this causes problems because you have such a strain on your hands and you feel that the wheel is in control of you and not you in control of the wheel. Now, if the tension is too loose, of course, the yarn will not take on, but there are other reasons which stop the yarn being taken on properly. Sometimes a single fibre can catch on one of the hooks and delay it. If you have insufficient lubrication of all the points of the wheel, which must be lubricated, you can have insufficient pull. Also, you can have insufficient pull if there is too much grease from spinning wool in the grease from the wool fibres, which clogs up the thing and makes everything insufficiently geared to taking on the wool. Remember that your spinning wheel is a mechanical device and appreciates being cared for and kept well oiled and looked after and kept clean. Never let grease or polish or varnish near any of the grooves of your spinning wheel. This causes trouble. Now I'm going to use a spinning wheel to spin from the combed staple. To make yarn, I must first draft the fibres and let the wheel twist them. The most important factor in drafting is the length of the staple. The length of the staple is the most important technical fact connected with drafting. Let me show you. If I have a staple as long as this, and I hold it, has my hand separation about 2 inches or 3 inches, and try to draft, look what happens. My carefully prepared fibres have all got jumbled up, and I will have to spend the rest of the time sorting them out. But if I draft with my hands a staple length apart, the fibres stay well organized to the last fibre. Let me show you. Now the staple length is this, and I'm holding the far end of my staple in my hand, and so that I have my hand separation just more than the length of the fibre, and my fibres keep organized to the very last moment, and I never have to reorganize them. It is ideal if all fibres are either under the control of one hand or the other, but none held by both hands. If hand separation is much greater than the fibre length, the yarn will be uneven. Some fibres are controlled by neither hand. Correct hand separation is the most important single aid to easy drafting and good spinning. This technique I'm using is called short draw, and the principle of correct hand separation applies to any short draw spinning of staples, of rolags, in the drafting of rovings, and for fibres of any length. It enables you to control the evenness and the thickness of the yarn. Now I'm going to show you how I control the thickness and the evenness of my yarn. First of all, I like to have a fan of fibres coming from the combed staple. Secondly, I like to have my hand separation just greater than the staple length of the fibres. And you can see the staple length of the fibres there. Next, I always make sure I'm feeding regularly into the orifice. And lastly, or rather not lastly, but fourthly, that I'm relaxing my backhand every time I draft. Every time I feed in, I relax my backhand in order to make sure that I'm not starving the fan of fibres. Now I do two other things, and I will pick up another staple before I show you them. Here is my fan once more. If I see that the fan is becoming a little thin, incidentally, I look always at about 1/3 of the way along the fan to check that my fibre quantity is as I want it. If I see it getting a little thin, I will roll a little twist into the fibres to allow me not to get the thread too thin. I'll roll in, twist. If I see them getting a little too many fibres, I will roll, twist out and allow myself to draft more. I've got a little thin, so I'm rolling fibres in to keep the thickness of the yarn even. This staple has got disorganised because I picked up 2 staples by mistake. There we are. And I'm rolling twist in or rolling twist out. The fibres are picked up as I go into the staple. Now let me take a short staple, ready combed. Here I'm holding, again, my hands much closer together, but I'm still holding them just more than the staple length apart. And you see how I relax my backhand every time that I draft forward. I never relinquish hold of the yarn. If I did, the twist would come forward and it would trap fibres there and I wouldn't be able to get the yarn so smooth. So I always hold, keep contact with at least one finger of my orifice hand. I will now pick up a long stapled, a long fibred staple, and you will see how I control that by holding my hands a staple length apart, and I never jumble it. You see how I never relinquish hold of the yarn. My fibres stay perfectly aligned because I'm holding my hands a staple length apart. Now, even if I was spinning a rolag, I would also pay attention to the fibre length, which is now concealed, in the rolag. This rolag was made from that medium staple, and as I draft it, it tells me what the length of the fibres are. And so again, you see how I open my hand every time I treadle, or every other time. So my rolag stays undisturbed because I'm paying attention to the fibre length. Now if I want to make the yarn thicker, I can simply roll in more twist and draft. And there I have a thicker yarn. And I can keep that thickness as I want it, keeping the twist keep the yarn thicker. If I want to make it thinner, then I draft it. I don't draft the twist out until it is thinner. So I can control my thickness as I wish. We have explored ways of making yarns thinner and thicker by control of drafting. The correct size or thickness of yarn is vital to the finished article. To follow a knitting pattern, knitters must know the size of their yarn. It is usually plied yarn. For instance, this size of yarn was used to make this delicate scarf, and this size of yarn was used to make this heavy sweater. The yarn is usually plied. What size of single yarn will make any particular size of plied yarn? 2-ply is not twice the thickness of singles. Can we use a measure? Yarn diameter is one measure of yarn thickness. I am going to draw some yarn off the bobbin in order to show you how to measure it. I'm going to wrap it around this pencil with the 1 inch marked off, and now I'm rolling up and completing covering of the inch. Now when I have covered 1 inch, I can count the number of yarn, the number of wraps that it takes to cover that yarn. And that I've just covered it so that I cannot see the colour of the pencil underneath the yarn. And I can count the strands: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 threads covering 1 inch. So I call this thread 20 threads to the inch in diameter. This chart shows the method of winding the yarn for both S and Z twists. The S twist, in the S twist, the yarn should be wound counterclockwise round the pencil, and for the Z twist, the yarn should be wound clockwise round the pencil in order to keep the twist present in the yarn. Now, would you like to spin some of your own yarn and measure it in the way I've shown you and see what thread diameter, what yarn diameter you are normally spinning?
Worsted is the style of yarn spun by this short draw technique. Let's watch Mabel spin some worsted yarn. Fibers kept parallel by preparation and spinning technique produce clear, smooth, sleek yarn, ideal for displaying in color or intricate pattern. Woven, it makes clear, smooth-surfaced fabric. When we desire this type of yarn, we usually choose long stapled fiber. Woolen spun yarn contrasts with this and is described later. we would choose short fiber for woolen spun yarn. Thin to medium yarns can be spun from combed staples. Thicker yarns need more fiber.
Now spin from the combed staples that you prepared, varying the thickness and practicing the hand separation for the 3 different lengths of staple that you used. A chart appears in the book which I wrote called The Essentials of Handspinning, which helps you to spin any 2-ply yarn the correct thickness, which you may desire. This is an excerpt from it. Let me explain it. Down the left-hand side, this is a selection of yarn types of different thicknesses, which accord with various commercial yarns. The fact that they don't apply, the names do not mean much to any particular country, don't matter. The first column across here gives you the threads per inch or wraps per inch, which is the size of that yarn in the measure I have shown you. And of course the wraps per centimetre. The following 3 columns give you the sizes of the knitting needles which would be used normally with this size of yarn. British, metric and American knitting needles appear there. And finally, in the last column, is the thickness of the singles which you must spin in wraps per inch or threads per inch, which, when it is 2-plied, will make the yarn corresponding to the name and the thickness. This will correspond to this, and this will correspond to this. Supposing I want to spin a 4-ply yarn, 4-ply fingering yarn. Now that is rather like American fingering. Another chart here will show you. The thickness of that yarn is 16 wraps per inch, and we should spin singles at 27 wraps per inch in order to have a yarn, when it's 2-plied, which will accord with this measure and this yarn. Now let me sit down and at my wheel and spin a yarn at 27 wraps per inch. I'll spin for a moment or two and then measure it and see whether I have got the right thickness. I'm aiming for 27 threads per inch. A little thin there. Now let me measure that length. I think I have enough to measure. I'll take this ruler because you can also measure it on a ruler, and I will wind it round the ruler and only measure ½ an inch to save time. Now I put the rounds close enough so that I cannot see the colour of the underneath ruler, and then I can wind that on. Now how many rounds is that? 1, 2, I should have counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It is 15, it is slightly thin, but very little, because 15 is 30 wraps per inch. I should make it slightly thicker, but that is almost right. And now I can spin at this rate, a little thicker, and when you have spun and tested your yarn like this measure, you can always pull it off the bobbin, test it, and when you have a length that is just right, I recommend that you break off a length and hang it on the, tie it in a circle and hang it on the wheel somewhere to be a measure which you can refer to when you wish to do so. But this is now 27 threads per inch, and when I two-ply it, it should result in a yarn, a two-ply yarn of 16 wraps per inch. Now, why don't you spin a couple of bobbins of yarn to this specification, and then we'll be ready to ply. When we spin yarn and twist it, normally with Z twist, we put energy into it. Now, I'm about to ply, and because we normally ply in the opposite direction, that is to say, we normally ply S, or anti-clockwise, this particular yarn that I have on here as a leader is spun S. When we twist the yarn, we put energy into it. And the yarn wants to reduce the energy, and it does that if I allow this yarn to ply itself. It twists itself the opposite way. It's twisting itself Z because it is S spun. And in that way it reduces its energy. And when it has plied itself, it reduces the twist in the two singles, the two bits of the singles. When it has taken out sufficient twist from the singles so that there is just enough left in these two singles added together to balance the ply twist that it has put in itself, then the yarn is said to be balanced. And it has no tendency to wrinkle or to turn again on itself. This is what happens when you ply yarns. Now I have two bobbins here. There are two bobbins of yarn singles spun at 27 threads per inch. And remember, I can repeat this yarn at any time if I wish to do so, just by noting the thickness of the singles yarn that I have made. So I can repeat it at any time. When I ply, I'm going to take the ends of the threads of both bobbins, and I'm going to fix them on to the end of the leader. And I'm going to ply S. I'm just starting to get them onto the wheel at the moment. I'm not doing anything else until I have them safely stored on the bobbin. Now, there we are. It's on the bobbin. I adjust the tension to be just so as to take in lengths. When I ply in lengths of about 18 inches, and I'm ensure that the tension on both threads is exactly the same, and then I guide the twist into the yarn so that the yarns do not rub each other up as the twist goes into them, as would happen if I did that. You can see the yarns rubbing each other up. So I also ensure that I have a nicely balanced yarn that is slightly twisting, so I shall adjust my number of treadles. 2, 3, 4, and that seems rather nice. It's right, 5, 6. All right, 1, 2, 3. Let us see if we can get this balanced. It is almost balanced like that. So I shall put 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I keep the number of treadles steady for a consistent yarn. Don't forget to shift the hook every now and then. Knitting yarn should be plied to avoid the possibility of fabric becoming skewed, as in this example. While weaving yarns can be singles, they can be set in washing and will not give trouble. Now, why don't you ply your yarns together in the way I've shown you? Now, when we spin thin threads, it is quite all right to spin from a combed staple. But if we want to spin a thicker thread, we really need more fibres. And the best preparation for this is a roving. And I'm going to now show you how to make a roving. We need fibres more than 4 inches long. This is about 4.5. We comb or flick the staple. Stage 1. We then draw it out in this way, just as if we were drafting it for spinning, but just draw it out until it's about 3 times the length and lay it aside. Now we do that with each staple. Here I have several staples which have been drawn out ready, and I can put them on top of the one I showed you. Here we are. There is a bundle of combed staples which have been drawn out to about 3 times their length. Remember always that as you do that, the hand separation is vital. Now I'm going to put them all together and I'm going to draw them again into a long strand of parallel fibres. Do note that I'm always using a hand separation of about a staple length. Now I can do this twice until I have thinned it down to the thickness I want it. For some threads it's very important that you have exactly the right thickness. Very thick threads require this, and I would actually test the thickness of it in that way. But I will just make a bundle of rovings. When I have done that, it is actually very much better when you're spinning from a combed staple in this way to pull it apart and do it once more, because that distributes the fibres very well. And I will just Now, when I've got it pulled out like that, and all even at this end, it's not quite even, and now I'm going to put a little bit of twist into it and make it into a bird's nest. Now, as you see, I have a box full of bird's nests here, all ready for spinning. There are certain tips I can give you. Let me pick this one up and show you again. When you're pulling, and if you have your hands too close together, you think you have to pull very hard, and so you pull very hard, and suddenly you have drawn it apart. Another thing you can do is to pull, and then to move your hands to there and pull. In that way, you have not moved the fibres there and there, and you have thick places there and there, and thin places there and there. And so you have an uneven roving. Another thing that you can do is that you can, as it were, slide your hands along the roving, and that just undoes all the work you have so carefully done. So in all cases, the cure is simply to pull the thing apart, put it together again, and draw once more, this time correctly. Taking small steps, always correct hand separation. Don't pull when it is too thin, but only when you wish to thin it down. Small steps, hand separation, and you have an even roving, which I can now put a little twist in and make into a bird's nest. Now, this preparation is the equivalent of the preparation produced by worsted combs, for instance. It is not the same result, but it is rather the equivalent. It is also can be produced from commercial combed tops, which are of course strands, combed strands of fibres. And it can be produced, a similar thing can be produced very quickly when you drum card. And now I'll show you how I use the drum carder to do this. Here is the drum carder. The only time I ever tease wool is when I'm going to use a drum carder. And this is again because I get the preparation I want from it. Here I take a staple. The way I tease is to take a staple and pull out from the middle, making a long, thin arrangement of wool. And I put it onto the tray. I'll just do that once more. I hold the staple down the length of my finger and pull the things. It ensures that the tips and the butts have all been opened. And now I simply let the wool go on to the drum carder. Now, the carding action takes place at the moment that the fibres, which are pulled in by the liquor in, the cylindrical liquor in, are transferred from the tips of the wires of the liquor in to the swift, which is moving very swiftly. And that is what happens to the fibres. You can see them being drawn across there. I'll take that whisker off. I could put a few more in, and I never, ever restrain the fibres on the tray, because if you do that, the tension on these fibres put onto the cylindrical liquor in just pulls the fibre to the bottom of these wires and prevents them transferring to the drum or the swift. But, so here we are. Now, that is sufficient. Notice that it's a very light job, and I do not require to use the clamps to clamp the drum card at the table. There is no effort involved in this way of using it. Now, I have prepared the drum carder so it's nearly full, and I'll show you how I take it off. I first split the bat in small sections, of course, because it's this little tip may help you. I tuck the inside of a kitchen roll into the edge of the bat, put a piece of paper between the kitchen paper roll and the fibres, and roll these up very tightly indeed. The tension as I take the fibres off these wires ensures that they come off cleanly. I'm rolling very tightly indeed, pulling tension to make the swift clean. And then I simply have to drop the paper and the roll, and you can see what a very well arranged bat we have here. I can split it, and the rovings are practically made without further work. Now, I would like you to make some rovings as I've shown you, ready for spinning a little later on. Now that we have a fibre preparation with plenty of fibres, the job of spinning a thicker thread is much easier. Here I'm spinning a thick thread at 16 threads per inch, or 8 per half inch. I'm going to spin a yarn for an iron sweater. Now, if I look at the chart, I see that for an Aran sweater, this is the thickness chart, an Aran sweater requires 17 threads per inch for the single thickness, 17 wraps per inch, in order to have a yarn which is finished of about 10 wraps per inch. And you would use an American needle of 7 or 8. I'm using one of the bird's nests, and I'm going to hold that thickness. Now that I have this preparation, it is so easy. Now, supposing I was to join on a new preparation, supposing I had come to the end of my bird's nest and I wanted to join on the next roving, I would do it in the following way. I would just touch the fibres and draw them out, like that. If, however, if I had been spinning a yarn for weaving, I would be very careful for warp particularly. If I was making yarn for a singles warp, I would be very careful to combine the last fibres of this yarn with the first fibres of this new preparation and almost roll them together. This is so that no single fibre appears on the outside of the yarn, which in a singles warp would rub up in the reed. Now there's one point that I might like to make as well. Sometimes when you are spinning, you'll find that you have a slight slab or slight thick place where you have held the yarn. Now, this can be eliminated very simply. It is caused by the fact that you are holding the undrafted fibres at the same place as the end of the yarn. If you simply always hold your yarn just a little before the twist ends, then you will eliminate that and get a very consistent yarn. It's quite easy to keep a thickness of yarn once you've established it. Always keeping a good hand separation. Now I would like you to spin yarn at 17 threads per inch with the rovings that you have made. Your yarn may have been over-twisted. Why is this, and can we prevent it? These charts will help to explain. The angle to which the fibres are twisted defines the quality of the yarn. This diagram shows fibres twisted to a small angle and has a soft twist. These fibres have been twisted to a high angle and have a hard twist. This chart shows yarns with their fibres twisted on this side with an S twist, and you can see that the fibres very nearly coincide with a 30-degree angle. On this side, the fibres are twisted, and you can see that they nearly coincide with the 30-degree angle on the Z side. You can measure your yarn, the twist angle of your yarn, with this twist angle guide. I will show you how to use it. The twist angle is most easily seen in yarn that is two colours. It is quite difficult to see it at first in plain colours, but here I am holding the yarn, which is two-coloured yarn, parallel to the central line with 0 degrees, and I move the card until one of the lines here, and I will show you, one of the lines here can be seen to coincide with one of these angled lines. Remember to hold your yarn parallel to that line and then compare the angles with those in the card. You can make two-colour yarn by making two little rovings in two different colours and spinning them together, as I have done here. And I'm doing. Now, why don't you make a two-colour yarn and measure it with your angle guide? I hope you enjoyed that, but we don't want to be peering at twist angles very much. Is there another measure that is useful? Yes, twists per inch is another measure, and this chart demonstrates it. Here we have an inch drawn on the chart, and you can see that there are 1, 2, 3 twists per inch in this yarn. Easy to see in plied yarn, difficult to see at first in singles yarn. It is not necessary for us to see it, though, however, our spinning wheel does it for us. There are dark spots on the driving wheel and on the flyer so that you can follow what I am going to say. When the flyer is given one turn, it puts one twist in the yarn. 2 turns, 2 twists. 3 turns, 3 twists. Well, we can't count like that. How many twists does the driving wheel put in when we treadle once? That is 1 revolution of the driving wheel. Let us take it. There is a spot there, and here is a spot here. I'll put them together. Now I'm going to turn the driving wheel once, and we'll count the number of times that the flyer revolves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just about 6 turns. A quarter less. So this wheel puts 6 turns into the yarn every time I treadle. 6 turns. This is called the twist ratio of the wheel. It can also be measured by measuring the circumference of the driving wheel and the circumference of the spindle whorl and dividing the one into the other. You will get the same answer.
Using this wheel, if Mabel feeds in 1 inch of yarn each treadle, she is spinning at 6 twists per inch. If she feeds in 2 inches per treadle, she is spinning at 3 twists per inch. The 6 twists are spread over the 2 inches. Feeding in 1/2 inch per treadle, that is 6 twists in 1/2 inch, she is spinning at 12 twists per inch. If Mabel wants a yarn with 6 twists per inch, she needs to feed 1 inch of yarn with each treadle. It really is quite easy, and many of you probably do something like this all of the time without thinking about it. I'm going to have Mabel show you how she keeps track of these measurements.
I have a knee cloth here which is marked off in inches and 1/2 inches. I simply move my thumb, the front edge of my thumb, back by the length that I wish to feed in. I can feed in 1 inch for each treadle, or 2 inches for 2 treadles, or 18 inches for 18 treadles, whichever I wish. Learn to treadle consciously, and then you will be able to control, not automatically. Now I would like you to measure the twist ratio of your wheel. Controlling twist is simply a matter of knowing how much yarn to feed in for each treadle. Now, twist angle is important, but thickness of yarn is also very important. Look at this chart. It consists of 3 yarns: a thick yarn, a medium-sized yarn, and a thin yarn. Now, there is one very important factor in all this, and that is that no matter what thickness the yarn is, all yarns twisted to the same twist angle have the same flexibility and handle. So we have a thick yarn, a medium yarn, and a thin yarn. They are all twisted to the same twist angle, as you can see, because their fibres which are spiralling up them all match the angle of this line. There is the thin yarn with its fibre spiralling up it. So these 3 yarns are all equivalent in flexibility and handle. There are horizontal lines here which represent each 1 inch. Note that the thick yarn has only 1 twist per inch. The medium yarn, in order to have the same twist angle, has 2 twists per inch. And the thin yarn, again, in order to have the same twist angle to its fibres, has to have 4 twists per inch. In other words, thick yarns need much less twist than medium, and thin need far more twist than medium yarns for the same quality. Now you may understand why it is that when you spun a thickish yarn, it might have been over-twisted. The way we make a thick yarn not too highly twisted is to feed it more quickly into the orifice, and to ensure that a thin yarn is suitably twisted, we feed it more slowly into the orifice. Now, there are certain purposes related to twist angles. Look at this chart. We have here different twist angles. This first twist angle is between 17 degrees and 20 degrees, and yarns twisted to that have a soft twist, suitable for some knitting yarns for fine garments. This angle here is between 21 degrees and 24 degrees, and it is a suitable twist for knitting yarn or for weft, knitting yarn for a slightly more hard-wearing garment. And this angle here, between 25 and 28 degrees, is suitable for a harder knitting yarn, rather hard, or a warp yarn. It is above this, it would be higher twist, high twist. So we don't want to keep measuring twist angles all the time. What we want to know is what number of twists per inch we should give any yarn for any particular purpose. But we would like it expressed as a length of yarn to be fed into the orifice for any particular yarn. Here are some excerpts from the charts in the Essentials of Yarn Design, which will help you. This chart gives you the required twists per inch for any given twist angle and for any thread thickness. Along the top are the thread thicknesses from 60 threads per inch or wraps per inch right down through 27 and right down to 8 wraps per inch. Down the left-hand side are different purposes of yarn, such as soft knitting, medium soft, and so on, warp or high knitting, and they are all connected with the different twist angles. In this one we see that when we were spinning a yarn at 27 threads per inch, as we were doing to start with, and spinning it at 24 degrees, we required 6 twists per inch to satisfy that specification. This is just what you were doing when you were spinning and feeding 1 inch per treadle in with a wheel ratio of 6:1. This chart shows you the correct twists per inch for a yarn of 17 threads per inch, as you were also spinning, for a different angle of 21 degrees, a little softer, and it tells you that for that yarn thickness and that angle you should put 3.5 twists per inch in your yarn. This chart has 2 yarns on it. First of all, to spin a very thick yarn, such as an Icelandic lopi, at 21 degrees, here is the thickness of the lopi, 8 wraps per inch, 21 degrees. It requires 1.5 twists per inch. On the other hand, a very thin yarn of 60 wraps per inch, such as you might use for a gossamer scarf, and at a 24-degree angle requires 13 twists per inch. Now this chart tells you how much to feed in for these different twists per inch, although it is quite true that you can figure it out for yourself with a few moments' thought from the information you already have. This is a table which tells you how much to feed in for a wheel with a 6.5:1 ratio. For 1.5 twists per inch, as we would need for the very thick yarn, you would need to feed on that wheel 4.5 inches per treadle. 4.5 inches per treadle. For the yarn which was gossamer, we would need to feed in, that was the one that required 13 twists per inch. We would need to feed only 1/2 inch per treadle. 1/2 inch per treadle. 2 treadles per inch. For the thread that required 3.5 twists per inch, that would require to be fed in at the rate of 2 inches per treadle. Now I'm going to show you how I spin yarn at 17 threads per inch. Then I will show you how I spin it at 8 threads per inch. And finally, how I spin it for gossamer at 60 or more threads per inch. "17 threads per inch, as you remember, has to be fed in at 2 inches per treadle. Now I will show you how I do the Icelandic. I pick up one of the bird's nests, and remember that this has to be fed in on this ratio of 6 to 1 at 4.5 inches per treadle. I have to join on my yarn, my fibres, until I have the now. Right. Now I'm actually going to turn this bird's nest round because the fibres seem to be lying better, and you will see why in a moment. It will depend on the way I have drawn it. Right. Now I'm going to feed in on the down treadle and draw back on the up treadle this way. Keep your fibres under tension. I don't draft at all, simply feed in the twisted yarn. And finally, there's the yarn there. And finally, I will show you how I spin gossamer. When you're spinning fine yarn, one staple lasts for a long time. Sometimes I spin straight from the comb staple, and at other times I make a delicate little roving, which is a little easier to handle. I'm going to make 2 rovings from this. Every fibre should be separated from every other fibre to ensure that you can draft. Now you can start spinning about 27 threads per inch, and then you get thinner and you're spinning at 2 treadles per inch. And then when you get thinner still, you're spinning at 3 treadles per inch. And you can be spinning at 4 treadles per inch as you get thinner. Now, when I made the gossamer scarf, I was spinning thread at nearly 100 wraps per inch, and I had to put 45 twists per inch in that thread to keep it correct handle. It was soft thread, but it needed 45 twists per inch. I'm spinning at 4 treadles per inch. I need to reduce my tension so that I can pull the yarn off the bobbin. That is the right tension, so it is not pulling my yarn and breaking it. If I had a higher twist ratio, if I was using a higher twist ratio, I would be able to put in fewer treadles to reach my 45 threads per inch.
Of course, not all spinning wheels spin at the same rate. Wheels with low twist ratios are only practical for thick threads, while those with high twist ratios are for fine threads. In general, use the largest spindle whirl, the lowest ratio, for thick yarns, and the smallest whirl for thin yarns. The yarn which contrasts with worsted is woolen spun yarn. It is the other principal traditional style of yarn. The yarn is spun from short fibers not more than 3 1/2 inches long, carded and made into slender rolags and spun with a particular long draw technique which retains the spiral structure of the rolag. The yarn is very elastic and traps air. It is the best insulator both from cold and heat. Mabel says this is a good way of spinning very short fibers, such as silk noil, camel, cotton, and rabbit. They can also be successfully blended with each other and with short wool. It is excellent for texture in knitting and weaving, in contrast to the sleek clarity of worsted fabric. Commercially carded wool may save time and is preferred by some spinners, but it does not produce the results that Mabel wants.
Now I'll show you how to card and make rolags. Here are my carders. I take some short wool and mount it on the carders. I can draw the tips through the wires and this teases them. I do not have to tease the wool before I put it on the carders. I try to make an even loading of the carder, but I never put too much on because the bat is never turned over, and so you always want to make sure that the underside has had sufficient treatment. A light loading is best. I never mesh the wires except when I'm doffing. Let me do it once again. You can spin any length of fibre, however short. Anything with two ends can be spun with as long as it is not too long. If I make full strokes every time, fibres will build up on these back wires. So I adopt 1/3, 2/3 and 3/3. And I tip up the bottom hat carder in order that I get a very nice distribution and well adhering to the wires. I remove seeds. Now, why don't you card some short wool and make rolags, as I've shown you? This spinning technique is traditionally known as long draw. Other techniques are nowadays called long draw, which are not the same as this, and so there's a slight confusion in terminology. And some yarns are termed long draw, which have not the same structure. I will now show you how I do this technique, but doing it slowly to explain it. I always join my rolag on with short draw. I've adjusted my tension so that the yarn will be taken on in length of about 18 inches at one time, but is not too tight. This is a technique which must be practiced with a slightly low tension. I build up a little twist. You see the tension is not too high because my fibres are not being taken into the wheel, and there's no twist in these fibres, so they have no strength there. So I build up a little twist, and then I hold and draw. I hold the twisted place which first appears, because as soon as it becomes thin, the twist from here jumps to any thin place and makes it strong, so that the fibres there do not attenuate. But these fibres have not sufficient twist, and so I can pull the yarn out and make it all level just by pulling out. Then I finish by putting the correct amount of twist in that length of yarn. Once again, build up twist, pull, and I've got to hold both ends to pull the twisted bit. You've got to hold a twisted bit in order to have sufficient pull strength in the pull of the yarn to draw out these thicker bits, the bits where the yarn, the fibres are not attenuated. Right, and then I count treadles when I start doing this technique to make sure that I get sufficient treadles, and I get that information from the tables in yarn design when I have settled on the thickness of yarn I want to spin. So I can make the thread any thickness I want. The thickness of the thread, final thread, is the thickness of the place that the twist first goes to. And so if I want a thin thread, I pull early and slowly, and I can make a thin thread. I can go on pulling, but when it's thin, I must put more treadles in, as you must now know. Or I can make it thick by waiting until more twist is in, until the twist comes, and then pulling quickly. So you can choose your thickness. Sometimes the yarn gets too thin and breaks. The reason for this is because the spinner has pulled too early. You do not want to pull that rolag until you have enough twist ready to jump into the fibres when they're thin. If by treadling too fast and in an uncontrolled way before you understand it, you get it so that you can't pull, please do not be tempted to extend the yarn in the way I'll show you. This is over twisted, but I will demonstrate what I mean here. Sometimes people are tempted to do this sort of thing. This is often called long draw, but the fibres are in a fan, and it is exactly the same as short draw. The place where the fibres are being twisted there is just the same as my hand when I'm making short draw. So the yarn structure of this yarn that I'm making now is different from the yarn structure which I demonstrate to you when I do the correct technique. The spiral nature of the rolag has been incorporated in this yarn, and this is why it is so elastic. If by any chance you have over twisted, just drop, pick up again, a little twist has come out of it, and you can now pull. A little flappy bit there, but if I just roll in the twist like that, it disappears. The yarn should always feel like elastic between your hands as it draws out. To ensure this, the orifice hand lets tiny amounts of twist through on demand as you wish, in order to keep a constant amount of twists per inch in the ever-increasing length of the yarn as you draw it. Sometimes when you're learning this technique, a slab forms here in this area near my hand and doesn't seem to be able to pull out. That is simply because you're holding your orifice hand too near the fibres. Just move them back a little and you'll find that is no problem. Always ensure that a sufficient twist is put in the yarn. When you have newly formed it, and it is just the right thickness, it is not a yarn. It is still just expanding fibres. So make sure that you insert the correct amount of twist. And when you are familiar with the technique, you can apply the tables in the yarn design book to this technique. Now I'm just going to spin a rolag of a blend. This is a blend of Angora and silk noil. You will see how the texture of the yarn is interesting. You would, of course, ply this with something fairly strong, like a woolen yarn, normal woolen yarn, but you will get texture. And this technique is very fast method of spinning very short fibres. Remember that the thin places in between are very thin, and therefore you must put a lot of twist to keep this yarn structurally sound, because these bits are so thin. And then I could show you how I spin 100% silk noil, which of course is an extremely short fibre. Remember, I never move my hand back. I always keep holding the one place that I went to when it was twisted. This also would want to be plied with something strong. But it's quite an interesting yarn. Right. Now, why don't you practice this woolen long draw technique that I have shown you from the rolags that you prepared earlier? It is a magic technique and very fast.
Hand-spinning good, simple yarns designed for specific projects is satisfying, but mastering the control of thickness and twist in the way this course has explained opens up ways of successfully spinning all sorts of exciting, fancy yarns, a little of which, incorporated into a garment or textile, puts your article into a class of its own. Mabel's hand-woven jacket is an example of this. It combines simple commercial yarns with her beautiful hand-spun novelty yarns.
I have so much enjoyed visiting America and coming and sharing my ideas about spinning with you.